Cool. Hey, everybody. Welcome to OWASP Toronto's April event. We're very excited to have this. Hey, everybody. Welcome to joining us this month Toronto's April event. SAST programs that are in distress. We're very excited to. So we know we're a little bit late starting, but we'll just do a little bit of preamble here. As usual, if you are looking for I2C credits, please be sure to fill in the feedback form in the video's description. If anybody is looking for a job or has a job that they're looking for candidates, definitely drop those in the comments of the live stream. And yeah, I think that's everything. As always, please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. We'll be sure to bring them up to Vasilii as well. And yeah, looking forward to a really interesting talk. So Vasilii, thanks so much for joining us. I know this was like a little bit last minute, but yeah, it's great to have you here.
Oh yeah, thanks for letting me talk today.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I guess like just to get started, can you tell us a bit about yourself and like your background, kind of like maybe how you got into AppSec, what you're doing before that kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you already know, my name is Vasilii Ermilov. I work for R2C. It's a San Francisco-based startup. Our mission is to improve software security and reliability. That's why we work on such a project called SemGrep. It's an open source static analysis tool. So yeah, that's like what we do. That's our mission. Speaking about myself, well, I started as a software engineer, but I was always interested in security since day one. Well, with computer security in general, but when you do software engineering, inevitably you end up being interested in AppSec. Like it's the best thing. So yep, and I don't say that I was like interested in SAST specifically. It was just a natural thing because I was interested in bug hunting, and when you hunt for bugs, you like come up with an idea how can I find the same patterns across other code bases. Especially nowadays with the open source activities going on and different package managers, I was trying to find bugs in NPM, PyTest, stuff like that, and I was interested. I was like trying to come up with my own solutions on how I can find bugs at scale. And R2C at that time was doing pretty much the same, but in a better way. Like I was doing it like on my scrappy scripts at home, and they had a product made by top-notch engineers, Ivy League graduates, etc. So, and we became friends, and then I just joined. So,
nice. That was exactly the next question I was going to ask is how you kind of ended up at RTC, but that's awesome to hear. So I guess like as we jump into this talk, like what sort of companies have you seen implement SAST programs? And like what challenges, I guess, are they typically trying to solve when they're doing that?
Well, okay. All companies are different. If we try to look at it like at a high level and try to like split it in different groups, well, of course, what can be the types of companies? There can be like either startup, a middle level company, or like a big company, huge enterprise, and they typically face different challenges and gonna have different goals, but it may vary. So let's say for a typical startup, what a startup would want to get from a static analysis tool is to just catch a low-hanging fruit, just to ensure that they follow the best practices and do not introduce something crazy in their code at an early stage. And this is all because, well, we're talking about startup, we're talking about 0 to 1 security person, best case scenario. So there's a challenge. For a middle level company, we're talking about some people involved in security, and they probably would want, of course, everything mentioned above, but also they would want maybe to, I don't know, do scan pull requests. Maybe they want to write some custom rules.
Right.
Maybe they want to, well, not maybe, but basically their task will be to protect the so-called crown jewels, so like the main targets, and that's like a never-ending task usually. So, but for big companies, it can be, of course, all the mentioned above, but it can be like so many crazy challenges that we can, like, every company is different, and every enterprise is like a whole different country, and they may have like challenges. For example, like, let's say big companies like to acquire smaller companies, and for example, they may want to do a deep scan of a new code base that is inherited and understand what is going on. Also, I think for big companies, the bigger problem actually than static analysis is to understand what they actually own. And because if you want to find vulnerability, you need to know like where to scan, like what targets you have. And I guess code asset inventory is like a first step for them before doing any scan.
No.
Okay, I'm not sure which microphone I'm using right now. Do you hear me better now? Okay, and now? Okay, is it better now? Okay. Okay, give me a second. I may try. Can I change the settings when I'm live?
Yeah.
Do you hear me now?
Oh, that's a lot better. Yeah.
Is it better? Okay, awesome. Give me a second. Yeah, sorry, it's my bad because you were like switching the streaming platforms. So.
All good.
Yeah. Cool. Oh. Okay, let's sum up. So like we have three potential type of companies: startups, mid-level companies, big companies, such enterprises. So typical challenges for them could be like catch low-hanging fruit, ensure and enforce best practices. Then on the next level, you would want to get more like understanding on what's going on, be more verbose, probably write custom rules, scan pull requests, and do some manual reviews maybe. And for big companies, it can be like whatever, like because they're all different, but I think big companies would want to understand, first of all, what they own, so have a good code inventory. And also, they sometimes want a better scan, meaning like deep scan, to have better understanding what is going on a more deep level. That's it.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. As far as like custom rules go for like kind of what you're saying for like mid-level startups, like are there like kind of any like classes of custom rules that you see them typically implementing, or is it like very specific company to company?
Well, it's like, of course, it's going to be specific from company to company. It's just the thing is like there are certain types of rules that, for example, we as a vendor cannot provide to you, or even not only us, but because at SemGrep, for example, we have like a community supported registry of rules. So people can only share the like generalized type of rules, like covering certain framework, etc. But not only that, also there are types of vulnerabilities that can be quite effectively catched with static analysis, but they still involve customization. For example, from everybody want to catch IDORs, indirect object read, and it can be done with static analysis. But from static analysis point of view, a typical IDOR is just interaction with the database.
Right.
You will not highlight every interaction with the database. You will go crazy. But you, as a developer, AppSec, you know how you enforce authentication on your web controller. you also know which type of information is sensitive and how it gets extracted from database. So if you connect these two, you have another rule to catch. So, and this is where custom rules are like the best, or the only option, basically.
Totally. Yeah, and I just want to shout out also, like, SemGrep has a bunch of really great educational resources for, like, even from a developer's perspective if they want to write custom rules themselves. But yeah, it's really cool. So I guess, like, hopping into the topic for today, like, at a high level, like, what are some of the common challenges that you see companies trying to start SaaS programs like typically face?
Well, at a super high level, I would say it's that people do not get what they expect. So even like if we like, let's say, make a few steps back, even before like running a SaaS program, it's usually like to have a successful program, you need to answer a few questions even before you start. Like, first of all, like, why are you doing that? Like, what is the goal? What do you want to achieve? Examples we mentioned earlier, but they can be some more, like some different. Also, understand what are you scanning? Like, what is the target? What is the code base? What you wanna, like, what type of bugs and like what frameworks basically, or like what type of programming languages you wanna target. And also, it's good to know how many resources do you have, meaning money, people, time, all of that. So when you conscious about this stuff, you can successfully start and understand like what type of tool you need, like to work out the SaaS program.
Right. And do you like? Is that something that you would say like companies typically like don't necessarily set clear enough goals for themselves at the beginning and like maybe end up with like the wrong tooling or like too ambitious goals kind of thing?
Well, yeah, of course. Well, like it's always how to say it. Like it's important in your life to manage your expectations. So, and people sometimes they look at static analysis tools as like a magic box that's gonna find everything for you. A lot of people they get disappointed with a lot of false positives that inevitably will happen at the first when you start. Here, the advice would be start slow and start small. I mean, not run a lot of rules immediately. Start with high confidence rules and high severity bugs, and graduate from that. Like move in small steps.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So yeah, like kind of phased rollout, making sure you're not like discouraging developers by throwing them up a bunch of false positives. Yeah, that definitely tracks with my experience as well. Cool. So I guess like at least in my experience, like an important part of a SaaS program being successful is like developers are like really engaged with it and they like actually action the alerts. They let you know kind of when rules are false positive and potentially why. And like eventually, like in an ideal world, like potentially even develop their own rules. Do you have any like tips for kind of driving developer engagement in terms of SaaS programs?
Okay. Speaking of developer, yeah, of course, developer engagement is important. But well, it's kind of my opinion. Maybe developers will agree that they want to be engaged as less as possible, meaning that you probably like to have a successful engagement. You probably would want to interact with them inside their workflow. There was a research. By the way, I will try to not forget and share some links by the end of the discussion. Google, they had the research about their internal tooling, and they come up with the understanding that developers do not like to go to like a separate web application that your application security people build. So if you like make them, hey, in order to fix this, you need to go to this website, see what's going on, and then get back to your code. It usually doesn't work. So you want to interact with developers inside their workflow. This is the first thing. Also, like usually you interact with developers when you want them to fix something. So you want to be as specific as you can. This includes like informative messaging, for example, or just description of what's going on. Like if, for example, the XSS is found, you like do not want to like send like a message, hey, here is the cross-site scripting vulnerability. This is this kind of vulnerability. This is how it usually mitigates. No, you want to be specific, like, okay, this is a Flask web application. You have a raw input in a template engine, Jinja, for example. This is how you not allow it to happen. Like, be super specific. Also, it's good to have opportunity to quickly receive feedback from developer if it's like helpful, not helpful, if it's like this is stupid or this is works. Usually it's like and dislike in social media, but as we know, nobody hit like, everybody hits dislike when they are not satisfied, because it's like how it should work. If everything works fine, it should even pop up. But yeah. So another like thing about how to like work efficiently with developers, maybe like in a more mature way, is provide like a safe path, like so-called paved road or secure defaults, meaning that instead of like saying, hey, you have SQL injection, now figure it out, like we don't want to see it, you say like, hey, you work with an unsecure library, we have like a secure default library that you gonna use, and everything will be fine. Well, secure libraries can work different, not necessarily. Maybe you can have like a documented way of how you do things, like for example, how you do authentication, and you can, in most cases, enforce it with static analysis, for example.
Yeah. Like, yeah, I've seen like a lot of success with like exactly this last approach, where it's kind of like you provide a set of good defaults and then you write rules to detect when like developers are diverging from those defaults, essentially, and kind of let them know they might be doing something dangerous. Yeah. That's really cool. So I guess like one of the places where like SaaS programs can run into issues is if, like, as we talked about, like the expectations are set not properly with the engineering organization initially, or like there's kind of a you break trust with developers by like bombarding them with alerts that aren't useful or providing them with advice that isn't necessarily actionable right away. Do you have any tips for kind of like if a program has reached one of those points, like how to kind of like reset and like recover from something like that?
Well, yeah. First of all, I think what I would like to say is that speaking of like, for example, false positives, or just like let's say like bringing troubles to developers.
Yeah.
I think it's if you focus on like how not to bring trouble, it's like a way to bigger stress and bigger problems. But what you should focus on, not introduce trouble, but how to quickly fix it. So let's say
Right.
you introduced a lot of false positives. You should try to focus on how you can quickly mitigate it, maybe like update the rule, whatever, how to quickly get feedback from developers, etc. This is the way how they will understand, like, okay, something happened, I can quickly share my feedback and the folks will figure it out
Right.
quickly. So that's the thing you would like to focus on. But also, like in general, I think, like speaking of SAST, maybe like you wanna get confident first. Like let's say you want to like run new rules or just run new tool. You probably want to triage it manually on your own, get confident that everything works fine, and then do it like automatically and like
Yeah.
pass it to developers.
Going back to like your original point about, yeah, you want to do like a stage rollout and kind of make sure that you're confident in the rules that you're actually implementing.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. The other question I had was like, I guess like a lot of what we talked about is kind of obviously want to minimize the amount of work that developers are doing and kind of make sure they're able to quickly fix things. But the reality is kind of like you end up pushing some more work onto them with a SaaS program typically. Do you have any like have you seen any good models for like how to align developer incentives with AppSec incentives and kind of like make it so developers are like actually interested in participating in like a SAST or just like more general AppSec program?
Yeah. Well, I guess there is no idea, like there is no like 100% opportunity to like make developers work on like the fixes and bugs. They always gonna have priorities, like other priorities. But at least trying to like communicate in the way that you prioritize vulnerabilities as general bugs,
Right.
at least in some way, some percent of it, it's like definitely, it's more like a, I don't know, political question. It's more about like how you, like this like people security aspect, like how you manage it all. And yeah, but at least trying to do it gonna help. Also, I think like what can help potentially is also introduce SAST tooling to developers. What I mean by that is like SAST tool is basically like a static analysis. It's a code scanning tool. It's not necessarily a security tool. It's just the security rules that we feed to SAST. And also you can enforce, for example, code quality rules that what developers can be interested in, or some sorts of like knowledge about code base, like best practices, maybe something that is documented and you can also turn it into a rule, and instead of like to-do comments and stuff like that. And maybe like potentially if developers like the tool and use it for their purpose, it will be easier to like communicate about security vulnerabilities with them.
Nice. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Cool. So I guess like one of the things you talked about like at the beginning was kind of like making sure you set expectations correctly, that you like know what metrics you're aiming towards. Are there any like metrics for SaaS programs that you've seen be like really effective or like maybe just like unexpected that people might not necessarily consider tracking?
Well, okay, metrics. So I think, you know, well, of course, it's important to measure stuff, like to measure what's going on. But it's also about how you look at these numbers. Like, for example, what typically you can measure is like number of findings. I think it's good to measure types of findings just to see what types of bugs you have. Like maybe you need to eliminate the whole class of bugs at once. Severity, false positive rate, stuff like that. But it's, for example, if the number of findings grows, it's not necessarily mean that you like do something bad or good. Maybe you just introduced a new tool, new set of rules. So these numbers may change. What is kind of stable in some way and can show you with some metric is time to discover vulnerability and maybe time you spend on fixing it. General, let's say, mental model for metric is that, or just for understanding are you doing good or bad, is that you getting, like your security is getting better, not when you discover things, but when you fix them.
Right.
So maybe like how quickly you fix what is found. So try to focus on that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I like the point you made about like both of those being like metrics that are going to be stable whether or not you're introducing like lots of vulnerabilities into code or like you're shipping generally secure code. That's yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that earlier you also talked about kind of like having rules that have a very like a low false positive rate. Do you have like a sense of kind of like what percentage false positive rate is like acceptable for most organizations? Is it kind of like a spectrum, or like what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, everybody gets different tolerance to false positives. It also depends maybe like on the experience with the SaaS programs, etc. But it also like false positive rate will inevitably depend on type of bugs you want to find and type of rules. First of all, first thing that I want to mention that you want like probably you're gonna have different false positive rate for different types of rules. What I mean by that, for example, you have CI and you want to find vulnerabilities continuously, you will have rules with a high confidence, high priority, high severity, and that you pass to developers. But for AppSec team, you may want more verbose rules that are fuzzy sometimes, but they end up being manually reviewed. And also, for example, at SemGrep app, what we have is we have opportunity to have like a set of rules that runs and blocks stuff, like blocks CI, and we have an unblocking set of rules, opportunity to run unblocking rules, maybe for AppSec team or for whoever is interested. And it's not necessarily going to be like rules, like security rules. It can be, for example, for AppSec, it can be like, hey, a new controller introduced in a web app. Take a look. And it can be, well, as we talk about false positive rate, it can be like a rather fuzzy rules that needs manual review, but they're not blocking people. Also, for a pen test, for example, you would like to have like, you want to highlight everything, all the hotspots. It's a different type of rule. It's just like, hey, here's the eval in the code. Like, so look at it. So yeah, different types of rules, and it's like it's more about how you gonna manage them, like craft your set of rules for a specific situation. So yeah, I guess it answers the false positive, right? Because it's like it's gonna be different. The thing is that here's the deal: if you can describe a vulnerability with a like small snippet of code, like a code pattern, it's chances are it's gonna be like gonna have a small rate of false positives and everything gonna be fine. But if you involve data flow, like complicated sources and things situation where it goes through multiple files, and regardless of a tool or company, it's gonna be at least some false positive rate inevitably. So
yeah, and I think like saying it depends, and like it depends on what you're trying to get out of the rules is like a completely fair answer there. Like in a similar vein, I guess, like, do you have any strong feelings about like surfacing not just like actual high confidence rules to developers, but also like potentially like warnings and stuff like that, as opposed to like having the AppSec team triage them? I guess like it depends obviously on what the organization is like, but yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're absolutely right. It depends. Depends like who gonna consume this information. Like me as a security researcher, like of course I want to show everything to everybody. But yeah, I think it's the thing you should tune according to like your current situation. Yeah, like probably use your messaging system of a company like Slack, for example, for high severity stuff. And just email some middle or like low severity, like occasionally to whoever is interested in it.
Nice. That makes a lot of sense. And outside of kind of like what you kind of touched on this already, but like, yeah, I was really interested in kind of if there are any other attributes of like really high confidence rules that you can share. Like, obviously, if you can describe vulnerability super succinctly as like a specific snippet of code, that makes it easier. But are there any other like patterns or anti patterns as far as like high confidence rules?
Well, in general, just by, I would say, like statistically or just like by experience, high confidence rules gonna be, first of all, config files, like different types of misconfiguration, again, because it's easily discoverable with static analysis. It's usually very effective to find cryptographic, like wrong crypto, and basically like usages of like wrong APIs, let's say, like and well, what else? Like different types of misconfiguration, wrong crypto, everything then can be described as an invariant. Like, for example, hey, you you verified JWT, you don't want to have like a hard-coded secret in it, like, so you it is easily discoverable. So but it's also possible to like have a high confidence rules that involve data flow. For example, but it's like when we work on rules that we like release to the public, to people, right? We want to work something that is working for everybody. So it's usually always a generalization of some sort. So like, okay, this is a web framework. Where are requests coming from? Like, where is the user input coming from? Like, usually the source is gonna be like a request. What are the typical things? It's gonna be like database, for example. What are typical database? So anyway, like the rule gonna work and it's gonna have like a good false positive rate, but you still would want to maybe tune it a little bit. And for example, we can, for example, create a good rule with like a low false positive rate, but what we cannot introduce, we don't know what sanitizers you use, for example. It's very easy to create a taint rule in SemGrep, for example, and we provide a lot for you, but we have no idea which sanitizers you use. But it's very easy to tweak the rule, just add your sanitizer, and the false positive rate can change like immediately. So yeah, false positive rate, it's not necessarily evil. Yeah, it's just the way how you work with it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I know we talked like a little bit about kind of like using off the shelf versus custom rules for organizations. I really like the example you gave of like kind of having a paved path for developers and kind of like detecting when they stray from that path essentially. Um, are there any other like use cases you can think of where like custom rules can like really go far compared to the effort you put into writing them?
Well, business logic, I think, because nobody gonna know the business logic you have, but there are situations where static analysis can find it. So this one, and the topics like that I mentioned previously, like with some rules, some vulnerabilities are can be easily found with static analysis, but they're very context specific.
Yeah.
Like mass assignment, for example, like you have like a sensitive data, but like if we try, like, of course you want to like write as many rules and like provide as many rules as we can, but if we like do like, hey, you pass in an object to a database, it's gonna highlight everything in everybody's web app. So it's like more up to you how to create it. So I would answer like business logic and some context specific vulnerabilities that involves like well, usually sensitive data, or well, what else, like something that only you know about. That's what like custom rules can help. Well, well, of course. Of course. Well, being a SemGrep tool representative, well, I can say it like without any doubt that SemGrep is a perfect tool for writing custom rules, because custom rules that like the syntax that we provide is the same as the code you write. So basically you write in rules in the language of the programming language you target, and with like a few additions. So if you want to start, I'll share the Slack channel where you can ask questions, and you can just type like semgrep.dev, and we have online playground where you can try rules and see like a tutorial, and like usually you can come up with a rule like in 5 minutes and write your first rule and just try things out quickly. So yeah.
Nice. I think that's fair recommendations. We do have the SemGrep Slack in the video description if you want to take a look at that. Yeah, I think that this was really all the questions that I had for you. I feel like we covered like a ton of ground here, so we'll give like a couple minutes if people have any other questions on the stream. But yeah, Ophi, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to ask as well. Sorry, Ophi, 1 second. I think that unfortunately the folks on YouTube were unable to hear your question. Yeah, but just really quickly to repeat it for everybody on the stream. I think like Ophi said it much more eloquently, but she was curious about how folks with like a mature QA practice can take advantage of static analysis tools with kind of like security in mind. And Ophi, feel free to correct me if I butchered that.
Well, well, first of all, I see that QA people successfully use static analysis. They know about, like usually, I mean, when we talk about like mature specialists, and I've seen that people implemented SemGrep for these purposes before. So it's definitely gonna work if we talk about like how to like use static analysis for like quality of code, because as I mentioned earlier, like static analysis, like it's not originally like a security tooling, it's like a way to work with the code and in general, so the rules can be different. Also, like speaking of QA, like if like how QA people want to learn about security, well, I think that first of all, there are a lot of successful examples where people like pivot from QA to security field, and because QA, like doing a QA, you already like, I know, like do 80% of the things. You just need to learn about vulnerabilities. For example, from static analysis point of view, you can look at the existing rules. With us, it's super easy. As I mentioned before, it's basically like reading code. You see code snippets. But as OWASP people, what can we advise? Like learn OWASP top 10, learn the basic vulnerabilities and see how it can be mitigated in code, like how things, how vulnerabilities are introduced and how you can mitigate them. So, and I think the rest is already like QA people already have the rest of it, like how to work with the code, how to test it. Just need to add a little bit of knowledge about vulnerabilities. Mhm. Okay. Do we need to repeat the question, or people heard it? It's fine.
I think it doesn't hurt to repeat the question. Opie, you might need to unmute yourself in StreamYard as well, so people can hear you. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It sounds like they didn't catch it. Your most recent question either. Sorry about that. I don't think they'll be able to if you're sharing the Hangouts tab. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So Opie's just gonna quickly type out the question so everybody can hear it, and we don't have to play like a game of broken telephone here. Yeah.
That's mostly my bad. I wasn't able to connect to StreamYard, so it's on me.
we gotta test our fallback plans more thoroughly next time, you know.
So okay. Speaking of, like, now I understand, you know, the original question was better, because like being involved in SemGrep and like its type of tooling, of course, I sometimes forget that a lot of static analysis tools, they're mostly like one button scan, where you're not involved at all, and you just catch security bugs. With SemGrep, or like as a general, let's say, situation, for QA, you want to use something minimalistic and something that integrates with your custom stuff, or like whatever things you have. SemGrep is perfect for this, and well, or other tool of your choice, but it's probably gonna be like something again minimalistic, something that allows you to manipulate the results. We have opportunity to output results. Well, we support multiple output types. There is a serif standard. It's a standard for static analysis output, but we also output stuff in a JSON format. They can easily be parsed and used for like the pipeline of yours. And yep, I think it makes sense to integrate, like to enrich existing QA tests with security tests. Sometimes I know that some pen testers, for example, they use tests as like, well, not necessarily starting point, but just the things where to look at, like of what's going on. And usually, if you have like vulnerability, you can enforce not introducing this vulnerability again with QA also. So yeah, it's important thing to do. And yeah, static analysis can also help here.
So Ofi's question was, what are Vasilei's thoughts on interactive security testing? Is it going to replace SAST anytime soon? Yeah.
Okay, so interactive testing versus like static analysis. Well, yeah, well, because we like talk about static analysis today for all of the time, I forgot to mention, or just like to keep in mind the fact that static analysis is going to be part of your whole security program. So it's, and of course, all ways of interactive testing are also important, but they have like, there is difference between those types of scanning. First of all, what is advantage of interactive scanning, like a dynamic scan, for example, is that those type of scanning usually gonna show you the vulnerabilities that like exploitable like super easily at the moment, and like that like the application is can be like hacked immediately with a certain payload, for example. But static analysis has the access to the whole code base usually, and it can catch or prevent things, and it can help you enforce and mitigate like problem before it even happens. And also, there is a big difference that interactive analysis involves like way more time to work, and static analysis can be way faster, and you can find bugs quicker. But usually, like it's not. I think the point is like that it's not going to be like war between those two. It's usually you need to have both, just for different situations. For static analysis for finding bugs quickly and mitigating problems, and all sorts of interactive scanning for like, I don't know, for other stuff, for finding vulnerabilities, low-hanging fruits usually that like are exposable right now.
Yeah. So just to repeat the question real quick, like Ofi was asking, aside from like SAST and the other kind of like standard security testing tools, are there any other tool sets that are like complementary or you think would be like a great addition to a security program?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, as well, not necessarily the tool, but as I mentioned at the very beginning, you cannot find bugs in a code that you don't know about. So it's usually important to understand your what you own. Well, it's not maybe a problem for like small companies. So if you like handling like you're a startup, you have like one application, everything is fine. But for big companies or mid-level companies, you wanna see your targets, and it's like I see that companies like that, they really appreciate the opportunity to like somehow like collect all this inventory and understand what is going on. There is no like specific tool at the moment, but and well, I think in general I'm not gonna answer like with the specific tools because there are so many of them, and but aside from code asset inventory thing, I would like also to mention, well, that as mentioned before, like static analysis is going to be part of your security program, and it's actually good to not to start with static analysis. Before you do it, you want to understand, or maybe you want to mitigate some other security problems, like for example, maybe not even touch the code and like understand like how to not, I don't know, how to keep people secure, like how to not introduce phishing, like try to keep secure from that, because like what's the reason to like protect from, I don't know, like some potential SSRF when like your employee can get hacked by an email first. So like you want to get rid of a lot of problems before even touching static analysis, like to be honest, like, and yeah, if we talk about like security programs, not only SAST programs in general. So also before, so like you want to have like your infrastructure secure, you want to have your like people, employees secure. Then when you go to the code, you want also not just run static analysis, you want to get knowledge about it. So you want to use some historical information, like what bugs were before, maybe use some like project management tools, bug trackers, task trackers, etc. This tooling also might help. And so, and it's like all mentioned above, like it's a whole huge combination of different tooling. So it's like, and all organizations are different. So yeah, and you know, all the knowledge, like for static analysis, it's very good to have the knowledge of what problems were before. First of all, because you want to understand what's like what you want, like what you want to achieve, what you want to protect from, and also like you want like to know what vulnerabilities happened before, and it can help you to have like a successful SAST program. And so speaking of like programs in general, I think well, all of this tooling can be helpful because they provide you the knowledge so about what's going on. Maybe because it can even give you information about like, hey, maybe it's not time to touch static analysis yet, or give you a lot of insight on like what's your crown jewel or what you want to protect. So all tools, I think, can be complementary here. Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I would like to maybe share some useful links for people. What's the best way to do? I can put it into Google Meet, and you can translate it.
If you want to toss it in Google Meet, we'll throw it into the YouTube comments.
Okay. Well, so first of all, people have our Slack channel where they can go and ask questions. You can reach out to me directly. There is only Vasilii in the public channel. Or you can feel free to ask questions just in the chat rooms. Everybody will be happy to answer your questions. So here is the link to a good research by Google on like lessons learned, their lessons learned on how they use SAST tools before. Here is the good talk. It's like a slides of presentation from Clint Bieber on how to scale your security, and this presentation has a lot of other useful links on like how to like scale your security, on like secure defaults, stuff like that. Also, speaking of SAST programs specifically, there is a good material called Boring AppSec newsletter. There are 3 links with useful advices that I recommend. Also, we talked a lot today about eliminating like bug classes, maybe like providing a secure way for developers, but it's like a totally different topic, and we have talk like a presentation on that topic also. You can watch here. Also, one security researcher recently posted a blog post about how to use SemGrep for finding hotspots during code review. This also might be useful. I highly recommend. And at the end of the talk, our discussion, we talked a lot about like security programs in general, not just SAST programs. And there is a good podcast about this topic exactly. It's more about, like people, how to manage people, but it's always interesting to hear somebody else, approach.
Yeah. So exactly. Tough, Filthy. I'm so sorry. All right, so it doesn't look like there are any other questions for the audience. So thank you everybody for sticking around for this talk, and thank you so much, Vasilii, for being so generous with your time. This was like a great chat, and like I definitely learned a lot. But yeah, this is it. As we mentioned, all those links that Vasilii mentioned are in the YouTube chat. I think that somebody asked if we have any plans for in-person meetups in the future. I think for Toronto, that's not something we have imminently, at least. But hopefully they won't be too far off. So yeah, thanks everybody for attending, and we'll see you in a couple weeks for our May talk. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.